Well, welcome back to Chapter 2 in our motor learning class. And just as a review, in Chapter 1, we defined some very important terms. We also looked at classification systems, three that were one-dimensional. And then we finished up with Gentile's taxonomy. And that's a very popular way that both physical therapists and other movement specialists use to help us classify motor skills. In Chapter 2, we're going to continue to look at some terminology, and we're going to specifically look at how we measure motor performance. And again, this is an important concept as we begin our semester in our motor learning class. So why study measurement? Why is that important? Well, first of all, when we practice our profession, we're looking at movement, and we're going to be looking at how we can assess performance as it relates to movement, how we evaluate movement, whether there's an improvement in movement. And so some of the concepts that we'll talk about will be helpful, as well as we do some of our motor learning labs for this class. We'll be talking about assessing and evaluating. And of course, as you read the literature in motor learning, um, there's much in the area of measurement and how we look at and how we measure different motor skills. So this chapter will just give you a brief overview of some of those measurement concepts. When we look at measuring motor skills, basically we have two broad categories. The first one would be what we call performance outcome measures, and this is probably what you think of when you think about measuring motor skill performance. It might be an outcome or result of the motor skill performed. For instance, how far did you throw the ball? Or how fast did you run in 50 yards? It tells us about the end result. It does not tell us about the movements involved that led to that end result. And it also doesn't give us a view about what muscles might be involved or how the nervous system might be involved. But it's still a very important measure and one that we use very often. Performance outcome measures. That's one broad category. And then the other category deals with performance production measures. And now this would indicate more of what is actually happening during the movement itself, the activity of different aspects of the motor control system. For instance, EMG, which stands for electromyography, and EEG, which be electroencephalogram recordings, recordings of brain activity. So both of these would be examples of measuring the production, the activity of the muscles or the nervous system as you produce a specific movement. There's a lot of different examples of both performance outcome measures and performance production measures found in Chapter 2 in our textbook. So I encourage you to review those examples and be ready to make distinctions between those two types of ways that we measure movement performance. Reaction time will be one performance outcome measure that we specifically will break down and speak more specifically about. So let's talk about reaction time. It's probably one of the most researched areas of motor learning literature, and it is a topic that you could choose for your review of literature paper. And again, it's probably been studied more than any other topic in the field of motor learning research. It's a common measure. Basically, how long does it take for you to prepare and initiate a movement? That's what reaction time is. You have a stimulus on your mark, get set, and then go. The go would be the beginning of the reaction time measure, and then the movement itself, the visible movement, would be then the end of that reaction time. So from the time you hear the stimulus or see the stimulus to the actual movement beginning would be the definition of reaction time. Again, we can look at motor skill performance, and there's lots of different reaction time components involved. I think in my sport, volleyball, reaction time is very, very critical as maybe one's playing defense and they have to take in information and make a decision, and then a lot of reaction time is measured in performance. So again, pretty common. Here is just a breakdown of what happens, the events and time intervals of just not reaction time, but also what we would call movement time. So let's begin here. On your mark, get set. That would be the 4 period. That would be before the stimulus is presented, and then go, or perhaps it's the gun that sounds off, or the whistle that blows. That would be the beginning of reaction time. From the time the signal is given, processed, and the time the response is initiated. That is what we call reaction time. From that moment until you actually see the movement itself and the end of that movement, that's what we term movement time. So in motor learning literature, we say that reaction time plus movement time equals, the term is response time. So reaction time is one part of response time. It's not the only part. The other part is what we would call movement time. And then as we add those two together, the amount of time it takes us to actually react and then move to the end of that movement, that's what we say is response time. Reaction time is different types. So the basic one would be what we consider simple reaction time. It's the example I just gave you. There's one stimulus, one response. It's called simple reaction time. Choice reaction time is when you're given 3 different stimuli along with 3 different movements. And so you have to make a choice, and you have to pick the right choice. So if I saw the color red, I'd have to press my index finger. If I saw the color blue, my middle finger. And if I saw the color green, my ring finger. That is what we would term choice reaction time. And then the third time is discrimination reaction time. And this may be where you might be shown a series of colors, but you're only going to respond when you see the color red. And so that would be with my index finger. So you discriminate, and that's how you make decisions. Lots of different tests out there for reaction time. When you think of video games, obviously, the better your reaction time, better you'll probably be at video games. And again, many sports have reaction time as an important part of the skill set needed to be successful. Again, don't want to overdwell this, but reaction time does have what we call interval components. And the use of EMG, again, EMG stands for electromyography. That's where your muscles initiate the movement. And now with EMG measures, we can break down reaction time and actually get much more specific information about how one gets ready to move when they hear or see a stimulus. So we break reaction time actually into 2 components. Reaction time is, first of all, your premotor time. Before there's any actual movement, you have what we call this quiet time. It's between the onset, on your mark, get set, go, and then the actual beginning of the activity. And then your motor time is the interval from the initial increase in muscle activity. You may not see the actual movement yet, but muscles are beginning to be activated until the actual limb moves. So you have this time before motor activity occurs, before the muscle is initiated. That's your quiet interval. And then you have what we call the motor time, which is from the time you have motor activity beginning until the actual limb movement. Again, studying this is only possible now because we are able to measure muscle activity with EMGs. So here's a picture of that.